Hey, it's your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. Focusing in on a viewer question I received, and that is to describe and go into a little bit more detail on the passive aggressive nature of her covert narcissistic husband. Someone who she's been married to for close to 20 years and is really kind of at the end of her rope, feeling resourceless, doesn't know what to do. So, we're looking at some strategies in terms of helping her move forward. And much of what she described her husband's behavior as a covert narcissist was that of passive aggressive. Basically, it's a reluctance to do something, a reluctance, a withdrawal of sort of really being a regular sort of support basis to somebody. It's an indirect way of making their feelings known that they're not happy with you, and they want to kind of keep a leg up in the relationship. So it's an indirect reticence where they will really sort of avoid doing certain things, basic things around the house, in the relationship, taking the helm for example with kids. So it's very interesting to identify this, but more so how to get beyond it, because passive aggressive behavior will take many formats, and usually people don't they buy the I will get to it sort of behavior in the beginning, but they don't realize that this person has either slacked off, or they have been reluctant to do it, or they do a poor job, so you constantly have to keep on them about it, and it's their way of getting attention. And it's especially evident when it repeats itself again and again and again, and constantly fights, discussions are open to that. Sort of lack of accountability, lack of responsibility, and really, and so it's a way indirectly, again, it's the circumventing, it's a way for them to indirectly get into having you bring things up. The burden is on you. It's a way for you to either then do the behavior that you had originally sought out, and then you say, never mind, give it here, and then you proceed with it, or it then creates a conflict consciousness, which is where she was at. So she wanted me to discuss this, really the role that it's serving the narcissist, as well as what it does to its impact in others. So I wanted to go into that a little bit. And it's really as a way, essentially for the covert narcissist to shy away and avoid confrontation. So if they just are very agreeable, very docile, very easy to work with, I would say very laid back in terms of how they originally respond to your request, or relationship needs, or relationship with them becomes demands. They're very laid back, and you really feel like a sense of, yes, I can trust this to you, and then you entrust in it, and yet it doesn't get done, or never gets brought up, or you're not seeing certain proactive actions in the relationship, so there becomes this gap, then there becomes this void, and then this person now is retreating to their own corner. They're doing their own thing, and they're not really providing in the relationship the way one would like. So this sort of sensitivity, I would say, first originates as a sensitivity in the covert narcissist. They seem very very sensitive, almost very wounded, and you really don't want to confront this person just because they seem so pleasant and easygoing. Yet this is essentially a tactic, a ploy, a device that they will use in order to feign, not incapable, but just really a sort of way to anger. I think that's really what's so misgiving, is that they don't really come out and say it, I'm unhappy, or, this is too much work, or I need time to myself. It's a way for them to avoid confrontation. And they'll also, do other things like, cut themselves while they're doing a simple activity. Then they've got blood, it's just like, it's a very typical repetitive, behavior. Or they use tools that aren't right for the job, and so they mess it up. These are all passive aggressive. In other words, it's a way for them to vent their hostility, and it then kind of surfaces within the relationship itself. Or they might misplace things, basic things. Constantly don't have things like batteries ready. I know that these are mundane things, but these are also, like passive aggressive ploys the covert narcissist will utilize in order to create that outburst, to create that anger, and kind of keep the attention on them. And really, it does tend to throw things off. So if you feel like they're like dragging their feet, I think is a common symptom. They're just kind of, dragging their feet on things, very sluggish, not really. It's not that they're like outwardly saying, I don't want to do this. They just don't do it. They say one thing and do another. So, that's, I think what's the issue of concern. And also, it can be somewhat threatening because you're relying on this person, you're counting on them to carry their weight in the relationship, and then they're just, they're not doing it. And so certain things don't get done, people don't get emailed, people don't get written to, whatever the case is. This is very much a covert narcissist attack of being passive aggressive. So it's really like a reluctance to do something, and it's a way to kind of essentially get back to this person just by not doing it. But the thing is, it's in the beginning it says, yes, I will do it, but there's never really the completion of it, or there's something wrong with the completion of the act itself. You just see, you'll see it again and again. They might nick something, and then they have to stop in the middle of their project, or et cetera, et cetera. I oftentimes find that the covert narcissist will, they do things like, even though they have money, they might buy very low quality certain tools or certain clothing, or they'll present that they're incapable when they are very capable. So it's like hiding of their responsibility and talents in the relationship is a way of controlling the information that goes between the wife and the spouse. And so if they can control the information, they keep them essentially starved of emotion or starved of, fulfillment. It's a way for them to kind of, siphon off, energy from them, and really sort of remain in their self-centered situation. Which is not always fair to the other. I think, like we were discussing with her today. And, they tend to, when they do get confronted, they tend to act somewhat threatening, and then oftentimes kind of like coming out of nowhere. And it's just like, and they might belabor the fact that they're, doing work around the house, and then they'll make a comment like, I really understand why a lot of people wouldn't do this themselves, so it's like, poor me, pity me. And it's a very sort of passive aggressive way of trying to retaliate or, blame shift what should not be rightfully blame shift onto the spouse. So I think that's the core of it, is that they tend to shift blame, burden, and, sort of guilt and fear, and a very sort of subtle intimidation on others who really aren't in the proper position to be receiving that hostility or that disrespect. And so, we see this sort of subtle threat in, denying the fulfillment or completion of tasks at hand. And they might make some, kind of sort of off statements, and just, kind of alluding to the fact that, they have worked so hard, or, they understand, how long, they'll just emphasize, in a very sort of wistful way, how hard they've worked to get this, and that you're unhappy. So they'll just create this passive aggressive environment, which keeps you sort of pressured and always feeling like, you're walking on eggshells. Even though here's this quiet person who's very easygoing, you still feel that there's some sort of tension, and that's because there's something underneath the surface which they're hiding. And essentially, when you're married to somebody, or in living quarters, work quarters, even if you're working with people, eventually you're going to start to realize that they're not kind of getting in the groove the way you would expect, or what's called for in the relationship. So that's really then what I find oftentimes that the spouse of the covert narcissist will then, take on double duty and, really pick up the slack where they had left off, and really taking on a lot more share of certain activities, and it does create that imbalance. So once again, you really do need to look at ways to keep a passive aggressive person accountable, and catch it right away. So rather than waiting for years and years into the relationship, or after something has not been done and you're running late and you're on a time crunch or something of that nature, feel free to really, I would say, call it in the beginning, and say something of the sort like, this has to get done. This is super important. Are you sure you have all the materials to get it done? Are you sure you have the knowledge to get it done? And not in a condescending way, because that would be, a sort of conflict consciousness, which you're not to feed into. So the proper thing would be just to state very objectively, are you able to get this done in the next hour? Is that feasible? Is that realistic? Okay, good. Do you have all the tools this time? Do we have the batteries together? Did you do what I asked you? I mean, I would say don't phrase it that way. Did you do what I asked you? Because I think this came up in our conversation. It's like constantly, it's like treating like a parent-child relationship with your spouse, which is not good, because I find that perpetuates the passive aggressivity. If you kind of like baby them, or like, chide them like that, they tend to really, become like sensitive and like sulk in that. So you really want to do more of the, did you do, were we able to check that off the list today? Can we put that in our done list? Something a little bit more polished, a little bit more, adult mannerisms, so that you're, keeping in step with them and keeping it at an adult level, and not a reactive sort of childish conflict consciousness level. So that's a very, very good way to keep them accountable, and make it, again, sort of short, sweet, to the point, but not, where you're like drumming up, past hurts and this, you always do this. I would say avoid that sort of reaction, because it doesn't get either of you anywhere. Just be aware of, when is a good time, and really learn to work with your spouse and your partner in terms of getting things done together, with respect to time, with respect to feasibility and things like that. And always acknowledge, even if you've been married a long time, always acknowledge, where they're at. I know you're super busy. Thank you so much for you give to our family. Reflect that back to them. Always, I find also that sometimes, in a covert narcissist relationship, the other has gotten so used to just being the one to toe the line, that they often forget to, outwardly compliment their spouse for jobs well done, even if it's like, expected things like, great job, getting everything together, or great job, coaching the guys at the softball game today. The kids really enjoyed your coaching, or the football, things of that nature. Make sure you acknowledge those little things, because that will really make them feel good. And they are definitely more prone to do something to satisfy you when you do something like that to make them feel good. The warm and fuzzies, so to speak, do go a long way, I would find, with the covert narcissist. They do enjoy those accolades and that sort of reflection of their unique personality and their unique contribution. So definitely step that up if you want to help disperse some of the passive aggressive tendencies that you see within the covert narcissist. And they might not give you a big gift or a special dinner. They might under reward you, but realize that this is just their their way, their very subtle way of keeping your compliment in heart. And that's the other thing I find with a covert narcissist, is that oftentimes they don't reflect back, as she was stating today, they don't always reflect back to your, with gifts. They tend to be very, very sleight of hand, I would say, when it comes sometimes to gifts for their spouse, or, the covert narcissist does not always compliment their spouse the way that they do, especially publicly or in front of the children. So, this, you create this sort of thankless atmosphere, where, really there should be one of gratitude. It tends to perpetuate a thankless atmosphere. So, there's that, furthermore, the ignoring, or saying nothing, where, again, the covert narcissist is not prone to say, oh my God, amazing meal you made, even though they should, even though they might feel like they take it for granted. I think that's the most hurtful thing, is that it tends to perpetuate and it makes the others feel taken for granted. So, then just bring it up, and just say, are you liking these meals? Do you like what we're trying here? If so, just vocalize your opinion. Give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down. Give me a smile, give me a sad face. Give me something here to go on, though, because, I kind of feel like I'm not getting a lot of feedback from you. So just do it in that lighthearted way, and that will help them to open up, because the covert narcissist usually traditionally is like Fort Knox. There's basically steel doors in front of them. I mean, you really can't get much out of them. They don't really tend to express a lot of emotion. They keep a lot of it underneath. And then if their blood is boiling, you would never ever know. For decades, you would never know what's going on with these people. They are extremely adept at keeping their feelings under lock and key, tight-lipped, in the basement, in the garage. I mean, oftentimes they don't even have an outlet with friends or things of that nature. They're very sort of bottled up. So, it's really, if you can, if you're still with them, say something like, what, how would you feel about doing this, to repair the roof? Is this something you feel would be a good investment? And do you want to help me select the contractors? Do you want to do it all? You want me to do it all myself, or do you want to do the first part and I'll do the second part? Like, make sure you get some organization and structure so that it is balanced, and get their agreement at where they're going to participate, so you don't feel like you're just towing the line unless you really want to and you enjoy that burden. Other ways of dealing with a covert narcissist, especially when they're procrastinating. They're putting things off. You feel like they're just not excited. They're not showing any emotion. They're just, you don't get a chuckle out of them. You don't get a smile. You don't get much in terms of something to feed from, in terms of like where their emotions are at. So this is also one of the most common, I would say, issues that we see with a covert narcissist, or complaint furthermore. And, then just try to use open-ended questions with a covert narcissist, and just say, if it's movies, theater, music, things you haven't done in a while, other activities, golfing, horseback riding, things that you maybe used to participate in, and then just bring it up and say, do you still enjoy that? Do you still want to try your hand at it? You might have to really encourage them. You might have to almost feel like you have to run the event for them, because they're oftentimes not going to make headway for this. So you might have to really take the leadership role. But, at least then once you get them, going and get them there, they'll start enjoying it and opening up, and then give you that emotional feedback that you feel is so vapid, or so evaporated and kind of dried up in your relationship. So, try those things, as we mentioned, just to put some life back into it, and realize that there's all sorts of other passive-aggressive ways here, but do try to work towards inclusion of them. Do try to work with things like percentages, or, how about you do this and I'll do that, so you get their understanding. Make sure that they have everything that they need to get it done, and make sure you kind of put a timeline on it, so that you're not wondering like why it's taking so long. Make sure you get that agreement, and make sure that they are able to then, back that up accordingly. Peace and harmony with you here today. I hope these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support.